so far the example that we've worked with so far has been without government spending. It's just been firms and households. And just in the chat, so that I know that you're here as well, let me know, what is the symbol that we use for government spending? What is the symbol that we use for government spending? You guys on fire. You guys on fire. Right? Definitely. It's G. So let's continue to read our example. And the reason why I'm working through this example with you is just so that we get some experience around this, because the next example we're obviously going through to your net exports, which I also find pretty fascinating. But I think economics as a whole is something that I enjoy. I'm sure you'll pick that up. Right. So moving right along, guys. The next bit then says, and we've got our 100 million econs. So we've got our equilibrium level. Well done to us in that regard. Now it says, suppose that government is then formed and that it spends 20 million econs per year. That is, G is equals to 20 million econs. At this stage, we are not concerned with the way in which this spending is financed. The introduction of government spending raises autonomous spending from 40 million to 60 million. Now remember, this was 40 million. But now we're adding government spending, which you guys have indicated is G. Let's put there government spending. As a result of this, your autonomous spending moves from 30 plus 10 plus 20. Right, and this is C, I plus G. And this is now 60. So that's our new autonomous spending, which in this case is A bar. Right. Next bit, the equilibrium level of income is thus obtained by multiplying autonomous spending A by the multiplier, and thus, so for us to now get our equilibrium level, and I'm going to put this into blue, would therefore be, but I think that they're putting this, they're making this a bit more complicated than needs be. So let's look at the final equilibrium with the multiplier added, right? Now remember that our example here is the multiplier multiplied by whatever we have as aggregate spending. Now remember, in this case, your multiplier with your tax involved is 1 minus C plus 1 minus T multiplied by your aggregate spending. Now in this case, guys, let me know in the chat, what is my marginal propensity to consume? What is my C? Let me know in the chat. What is my C? My marginal propensity to consume. Absolutely. 0.6. All right. And this is multiplied by 1 minus T. And T in this case, guys, we realize that t is 0.167. For now, we leave the y out, and then this is multiplied by 60. Now, remember that the first thing that we do when we're dealing with BODMAS is that we deal with what's inside the bracket, being this. So we'll write this all out again, and I'd always advocate that, remember, you want to do this bit by bit. So it'd be 0.1 minus 0.6, which we multiply by, and please, in your calculators, if you could just calculate that for me, 1 minus 0.167. Let me know what digits you come up with. Sure, okay, not a problem. 1 minus 0.167. 1 minus 0.167. I was asking, what digit do you come up with as a result of 1 minus 0.167? We're doing BODMAS here. Awesome, guys. So we have 0. 837, and we still have a 60 million here that we're obviously doing. Now from here, we then multiply your 0.6, and remember, the reason why we're doing this is to make sure that when you're doing it by yourself, you do it step by step. Your 0.6 multiplied by 0.837 or 0.83. Let me know what digits you come up with. Your 0.6 multiplied by 0.833, as you guys have indicated. .833 times 0.6. What's the number that you guys get? Okay, love it. So we now have 0.1 minus 0.4998 multiplied by 60. Now remember, in this case, guys, what we end up doing is that we take this and we put it to 2 decimal figures. And I'm just going to clean the board. It's getting a bit small. So we had 1 over, and this was the equilibrium level of income, y over 1 minus 0.4998 times 60. Now all we do here, guys, is that we just basically round this up. So therefore it should read 1 minus 0.50 to 2 decimal places times 60. All right, but we're continuing and we're making this even better. So it's 1 over 0.5 times 60. Now in your calculators, let me know as soon as you put 1 divided by 0.50. What's the digit that you come up with? 1 divided by 0.50. Abigail says 2. Can we all confirm that? Yes. Awesome. Awesome. Well done, Abigail. Well done, Mr. Kian. So that'll be 2 times 60. And this therefore equals 120 million econs. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I know that I've gone through this painstakingly slow and painstakingly in detail. Please do so when you get into your test situations or your exam situations. I can promise you that all your marks you will obviously obtain when you go through such a method. But if you skip certain stages, you might end up with a false figure. And obviously don't want that to be the case. So please just ensure that. Now, if you turn your pages to 388, you realize that we actually have 120 million econs. Right? It says that the new equilibrium level of income um, in economia is obtained by multiplying autonomous spending by the multiplier. Therefore, 2 times 60 is equal to 120 million econs. And therefore, we've got our full marks, right? Now, in the chat, just let me know with a thumbs up whether you actually got a grasp of that and you're like, look, it's making a bit more sense now that we've put numbers to it. Just give me a thumbs up. Awesome, Kian. Awesome, Abigail. Mazidi, Leon, Charlize, Abigail. Okay, perfect. Perfect. Okay, let's move on to the next bit. Let's move on to the next bit. Introducing the foreign sector into the Keynesian model, the open economy. Right. Now remember, up till now, guys, we've only dealt with C plus I plus G. We've only dealt with C plus I plus G. When we start talking about the foreign sector, what two symbols, algebraic symbols, are we dealing with next? Let me know in the chat. And you guys are switched on. Absolutely. Absolutely. But now we need to figure out what each and every one of those details, your X being your exports and your Z being your imports, what it means to the autonomous spending, the size of the multiplier, and the equilibrium level of income as well. We need to figure that out. So there's a bit of highlighting that we're going to do, and then we'll be done basically with the whole chapter thereafter. Right. So let's look into this. Let's look into this. On page 388. I would look into the second paragraph. It starts with the following: domestic expenditure, which is GDE, right? C plus I plus G does not represent all expenditure on domestic product. Part of the domestic product is exported, and the spending on these exports comes from the rest of the world. As we emphasized in chapter 3, spending on exports constitutes an injection into the circular flow of income and spending in a domestic economy. On the other hand, part of the domestic expenditure is spending on imported goods and services. Such spending on imports constitutes a leakage or withdrawal from the circular flow of income and spending in the country. In this section, we add the foreign sector to the Keynesian model and investigate how exports and imports affect the aggregate level of spending A, the multiplier, and the equilibrium level of income Y. We're still highlighting because exports Y is an injection, we expect them to have the same type of effect as any other injection, such as government spending G. Similarly, we expect imports Z to have the same type of effect on other leakages or withdrawals, such as taxes T. This indeed is the case, but there are a few differences that have to be taken into account. Right. Now, in this case, we look at exports. And we realize that when it comes down to exports, it is autonomous because it does not depend on income. Exports in this case depends on the rest of the world and its international competitiveness and exchange rates. That has nothing to do with income. And therefore, exports is autonomous, shown by X bar. What I want you to highlight though is the following. Under 388, it has the bold statement there: economic conditions in the rest of the world. It says that South Africa's exports depends largely on economic conditions in the rest of the world. Our international competitiveness and exchange rates, there are no systematic relationships between the level of exports, X, and the level of income, Y, in the domestic economy. We therefore say or assume that exports X like investment spending I and government spending G, are autonomous with respect to total income Y. In symbols, this can be expressed as Y is equals to X bar. Now, moving right along, you'll find in the middle there the word ceteris paribus slanted, and it says the introduction of exports X thus increases the aggregate spending A on the domestic production. Ceteris paribus. Like any other injection into the domestic flow of income and spending, it is subject to a multiplier effect, but exports do not affect the size of the multiplier. That is, they leave the slope of A curve unchanged. And if we have a look at your exports on page 389, it's exactly the same way that we've also looked at your autonomous consumption spending and autonomous consumption, autonomous consumption, autonomous investment spending, and autonomous government spending, right? They're all the same because they're all independent of income. Just give me a thumbs up if we're good in that regard. So far. Awesome stuff. Great stuff. Guys, I'm sure you see this now, but there's a lot of repetition that's happening here. There's just different definitions, right? But it's a lot of repetition. So now let's move to imports, because now we get it. We get that in this case, I'm going to put it on the board as well, your aggregate autonomous spending is influenced by your autonomous consumption, autonomous investment spending, autonomous government spending, plus, for now, your autonomous exports as well, because these do not depend on income. Let's deal with exports. Let's see what they say about, let's see with imports. Let's see what they say about imports. And in the center there, of your page 289, under imports, you see the words 80%. About 80% of South Africa's imports consist of capital and intermediate goods. When spending and income in a domestic economy increase, this automatically results in an increase in imports. Oh, seems like there's a relationship here. The positive relationship between domestic economic activity and imports is one of the strongest macroeconomic relationships in South African economy. It would therefore be unrealistic to assume that imports, Z, are autonomous with respect to total income Y. If income Y is the main determinant of imports, Z, the import function resembles the consumption function. Imports have an autonomous component Z, as well as an induced component MY, where M is the marginal propensity to import. This import function may be written as imports is equals to autonomous imports, which is we're going to import things regardless of the amount of income that we have, based on the fact that we have your exports happening. But there's also another component in the sense of, depending on how much income we have, we'll also obviously have a whole lot more imports that we have as well. All right, moving right along. So we've got there, and I'm going to put it on a separate piece of paper. We therefore now have a new function being Z is equals to, or imports is equals to autonomous imports plus the marginal propensity to import multiplied by your income. Still on page 289, you'll find the words imports in bold right at the bottom left. And what I want you to highlight would be the following. It says there, the most important fact about imports is that they represent a leakage or withdrawal from the circular flow of income and spending. In other words, when households and firms and the government spend on imported goods and services, they reduce aggregate spending on domestically produced goods and services, ceteris paribus. Whereas exports have been added to the other components of aggregate spending, imports Z have to be subtracted, taking both exports and imports into account, aggregate spending A can therefore be written as. Now let's work through this. And now we have your Z here. But let's break this out even further. So basically, at the end of the day, with our equation, well, you have your Z here as well. This is now for aggregate spending, aggregate consumption, I mean to say, or aggregate spending, I mean to say. But let's go back to our normal A. And I'm just going to use a different color to show this. Our normal A is aggregate spending is equals to C plus I plus G plus X plus Z. Now we realize that there's a consumption function here, and that consumption function is C bar plus CY. Right, which today we've actually realized that, wait, CY is actually not in and of itself by itself. We have your 1 minus TY, right? And then on top of that, we have your government spending, which is shown by your G. We also have your investment spending. I forgot about that one, which is shown by autonomous I. And then we've got your X, which is your exports, autonomous exports. And then we lastly have your other function for Z, which is your autonomous imports. All right. Now I've got everything together. Now remember, if in this case, and maybe I should just further elaborate on this before I go there. So what we then do after this is that we sit down and then we go, great, let's put what's the same together and what's different together as well. So in this case, we'll then have your C minus TY plus MY, right? Plus your autonomous spending, which is C plus I plus G plus X minus Z. All right, but we need to deal with these Y's. So the Y's would then be, in this case, C minus CTY plus MY, which once again, and I'm just going to put autonomous spending plus your autonomous spending. All right. Now remember that our formula also dictates the following, that your income is meant to equal your aggregate spending, and therefore your Y is then equals to C minus CTY plus MY plus aggregate spending. Sorry, and this is meant to be CY actually. I forgot to multiply it over here. So we want all the Y's on one side, and therefore it'll be Y minus CY plus CTY minus Actually, this plus. This should be a negative over here. Sorry, guys. More. This, on the other hand, was meant to be negative. And this was meant to be negative as well. All right, and this, guys, equals, once again, your autonomous spending. Moving on to page 290. Once we start doing your factoring, we then get y multiplied by 1 minus c Sorry, guys, my screen went blank there. Where did I last leave you? The screen's gone blank. Just let me know in the chat. Did your screen go blank as well? Okay. All right. I'm just going to do the last thing that I saw, which was, in this case, y. And this is on your textbook as well, page 390. One minus c, 1 minus t plus m is equals to our autonomous spending. But remember, we only want y. So tell me, no, what do I do in order to just get y in this case? What did I do to just get y in this case? What did I just do to get y? I will let you know. I'll divide by 1 over 1 minus c, 1 minus t plus m times y, 1 minus c, 1 minus t plus m. All right, and on this side, I'll multiply the same thing by 1 minus c. Brackets don't seem to want to work. It's t plus m multiplied by my aggregate by my autonomous spending. So therefore, y now equals your 1 over 1 minus marginal propensity to consume, 1 minus t plus m multiplied by our autonomous spending. Now multiply then changes. I'm sure you've seen this before, but now in this case, our multiplier has now changed to 1 over 1 minus C, 1 minus C plus M, being the marginal propensity to import. Right, guys, all that's changed from the previous statements that we've had is that we've just added more to the multiplier in this case. But just give me a thumbs up as to whether you've been able to follow through or not. If not, please ask the questions and we'll obviously go through it again. But give me a shout. If you're good, give me a thumbs up. If you're not, put on your mic and ask away. Abigail says she's good. Everybody else, let me know. All good, says Charlize as well. Kian, Zini, so I was put across. Leon, let me also know. Okay, cool. Cool. Now, what I want you guys to highlight on page 290 will be what's in bold there, just a sentence before. This may seem complicated, but actually it's quite simple, which I'm sure you guys are beginning to realize. As emphasized earlier, the equilibrium level of income is always equal to the multiplier multiplied by autonomous components of aggregate spending. That is why equilibrium level is equals to the multiplier multiplied by aggregate spending. Right. And then we get into an example there. Right, which just gives us what happens to your multiplier. I'm going to just skip past that because what's important would be the main conclusions on page 290. The main conclusion is just above the bullet points that lets us know exactly what's going on here. So the main conclusion of this section may be summarized as follows. Exports constitute an autonomous injection into the flow of income and spending, and they have the same impact on equilibrium level of income as any other component of aggregate autonomous spending, such as investment spending or government spending. Autonomous imports constitute a autonomous leakage from the flow of income and spending and have to be subtracted from the other components of autonomous spending. Induced imports are leakage or withdrawal from the domestic flow of income and spending. Induced imports are positively related to income. Income spent on imports will leak into the rest of the world. Now, we just want to prove something here. Via your multiplier. And the examples are inside your textbook, but I love to work things out. Right now, the first multiplier that we had with just taxes was 1 over 1 minus C multiplied by 1 minus T. T for taxes and C for marginal propensity to consume. Now, it gives us a bit of some numbers to work with there, just to figure out what happens to the multipliers as a result of adding your marginal propensity to import. So in this case, your C is 0.75, so 1 over 0.1 minus 0.75 multiplied by 1 minus T, and T in this case is 0.2 according to the textbook. And this is just an example that they're running. Now, remember, we're doing BODMAS here, and therefore we start with our brackets. Now, this is fairly simple, so we wouldn't need a calculator for that. 1 minus 0.75 multiplied by 0.8. Now we need our calculators. Let me know, guys, in the chat, 0.75 multiplied by 0.8. What do you get when you do that? 0.75 times 0.8. Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. So remember, we're working. Awesome. 0.6. And then this would be 1 over 0.4. Guys, let me just check in. Can you hear me? Okay, perfect. And if we do 0.1 divided by 0.4, what do we get? Perfect. In this case, we get 0.525. 0.25. All right. Now, moving right along, we're now going to add to our multiplier. We're going to add your marginal propensity to import. So this then equals 1 over 1 minus the marginal propensity to consume times 1 1 minus C open brackets 1 minus T plus M. That's our new one now, right? Now the same applies. 1 minus C, which is 0.75 plus 1 minus 0.2 plus M in this case, and M, guys, is 0.1 according to the textbook, the example that they've given. All right, then we still work this properly. We start with our brackets first, which is 1 minus 0.75 multiplied by 0.8 plus 0.1. Remember, we've got to always work our brackets first, right? And this will then be 1 over 1 minus 0.6 plus 0.1. And if we add that together, we'll have, in this case, 0.4 plus 0.1, which equates to 1 over 0.5. And if you put in your calculators, and just do that with me one last time, ladies and gentlemen, if you put that into your calculators, what number do you get? 1 divided by 0. Absolutely. So tell me, as a result of the maths that we've done just right now, right, does the marginal propensity to import increase the multiplier, or do they decrease the multiplier? Does the marginal propensity to import, shown by M, increase the multiplier or decrease the multiplier? Absolutely. Right. Simple stuff, man. Simple stuff. On page 292. Right, just finishing off the bullet points, it says there, in each round, the multiplier process and the multiplier will become smaller in a closed economy. In an open economy, the impact of a change in the aggregate spending is therefore also smaller than in a closed economy. Okay, now we're just going into theory mode now as we conclude this specific chapter. Now we'll remember that we only have one last thing to obviously look at here. It says the factors that determine the size of the multiplier. Now you can rest. We won't challenge your brain cells any further. Just a bunch of highlighting that we need to do. Factors that determine the size of the multiplier. First bullet point, the marginal propensity to consume determines what percentage of disposable income will be spent on consumption. A larger marginal propensity to consume implies that the larger part of any increase in income is spent on consumption and will therefore result in a larger multiplier effect. The larger the marginal propensity to consume, the larger the impact of a change in the aggregate spending of income. Likewise, the lower the marginal propensity to consume, the smaller the multiplier will be. Next, the tax rate determines what percentage of the increase in income is available for households to spend. The larger the part of an increase in income that is available for households to spend, the larger the increase in consumption due to the change in income. Therefore, the lower the tax rate, the larger the multiplier becomes, and the larger the impact of the change in expenditure on equilibrium income level will be. By the same token, the higher the tax rate, the smaller the multiplier will be. Last bit to highlight there, last bullet point, the marginal propensity to import, M, determines what percentage of an increase in income is spent on imported goods. When households spend their income on imported goods, income flows out of the country and therefore does not result in a further increase in income and consumption domestically. A larger propensity to import will therefore result in a smaller multiplier. The larger the marginal propensity to import, the larger the part of income that flows out of the country, and the smaller the effect of a change in the expenditure on the level of income or income level. Likewise, the smaller the marginal propensity to import, the larger the multiplier will be. Right. Now on page 393, page 393, we have the impact of fiscal policy on the equilibrium level in the Keynesian model. And I just want you to highlight the two bullet points. Remember, the fiscal policy deals with government spending and taxes. So we're not phased by these new words because we know exactly what they mean. What I want you to highlight would be the two bullet points. The change, the impact, and just the sentence right above it, the impact of changes in our two fiscal variables, government spending and the tax rate T, must be summarized as follows. If the government wishes to increase the equilibrium level of income, it can increase G and or decrease T, and that's what we call expansionary fiscal policy. The increase in G will initially have a direct impact on the aggregate spending A, which will then be multiplied as a result of an increase in the induced consumption spending. The decrease in T will increase the multiplier. A decrease in T will raise the equilibrium level of income in an indirect way by increasing disposable income and consumption at each level of income. That is, it raises induced consumption spending. That's key stuff. Highlight that. That's key stuff. Next bit, if the government wishes to reduce the equilibrium level of income, it can decrease G and or increase T. The effects will be exactly the opposite direction to the described above. Right. Then analyzing the change in government spending and using the using the Keynesian model, you'll have those two equations there, absolutely essential. Make sure that you highlight those. What's important is the theory behind them that says, in other words, the increase in government spending must be equal to the income gap that is used to close, that has to be closed divided by the multiplier. This is illustrated graphically in figure 18.8. Right, and which is more or less the same stuff that we've been covering thus far. What's important there would obviously be what's in gray, the box in gray on page 393. Still a lot more theory. And we've got 4 minutes left. An increase in government expenditure will therefore have the following effect. Right? And please highlight all those bullet points. A lot of repetition, guys, a lot of repetition. Then on page 395, you'll see an increase on the figure 18.9. An increase in tax rate is a simple Keynesian model. An increase in tax rate in the simple Keynesian model. And we see that our aggregate spending decreases. And our total income or production decreases as well. So just keep that in mind. Please highlight or just put a star next to the box that just lets you know how to obviously explain that word for word. On page 396, and I think I'll stop here for today. On page 396, I want you to highlight those bullet points. An increase in the average tax rate will therefore have the following effect. Please highlight all of that. And then still on page 396, right at the bottom, it has the effect of a fiscal policy in the Keynesian model may now be summarized as follows. Expansion in fiscal policy can consist of an increase in government spending and or decrease the tax rate. And I want you to highlight those bullet points. And then contraction in fiscal policy may involve a decrease in government spending and or increase in the tax rate. And I want you to highlight that as well. Right. Guys, for here and now, I think we've done quite a bit. I could finish this chapter off, but something tells me that it might be in my best interest to give you guys a breather. Let me know in the chat whether that's the case or not.